Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Hey, everybody, welcome. This is the Quiet Warrior. You know me, Tom Dutta, and we're here today live streaming. Next generation of really podcasting gone viral. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. By the way, you can chat with me and our guest in studio. Just find the chat box there. And, as you'll see here on the screen right now, if you're watching us, hey, there you go. Put a chat. We'll talk to you. We'll answer some questions, whatever you want to do. Got to tell you, I'm really excited. And last night I was really nervous because I was reading this book all night and I got so blown away by it. And then I thought, man, I had this guy on my show years ago and he's back. And every time he comes back, we get into this crazy conversation that goes deep. It goes up and down hills in the sun and in the rain. And we have such a great experience. And he's got this dark sense of humor like mine. So, he told me he sold 300 copies of his new book. And, first thing I thought in my head is, how the hell do you have 300 friends? I don't have those many friends. We were just riffing. He's in the green room. But let me tell you that today what we're going to do is we're going to be doing a whole bunch of new stuff. I've got a new segment, and you got to stay right till the end. It's called Plato's Garden. We're trying that out. Got a little segment on mental health. We're trying that out. But really, it's all about tying that into, I call him Augie, August Turak, our guest. So let me tell you a little bit about him, everybody. He's a successful corporate executive, entrepreneur, award-winning author, and that's big because yesterday his book just published. Speaker, man, you should see some of his YouTube videos, crazy good, and consultant. He's also the founder of educational nonprofit Self-Knowledge Symposium Foundation, which I think it's now the August Turak Foundation. I saw that on his website. He's lived and worked alongside the Trappist monks of Mepkin Abbey as a frequent monastic guest since 1996. So, my goodness. You'll notice by his haircut that he's taken a liking to the monks. After a corporate career with companies like MTV, he founded two highly successful software businesses. I think I remember last time I interviewed him, he said me and one other guy, or they had just a small amount of money, no seed capital, their own, and they built this thing, sold it. I mean, the guy has talent, published many popular leadership articles for Forbes, featured in Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Selling Magazine, New York Times, Business Week. His book, the first one that I read, The Business Secrets of Trappist Monks, 1,000 Years of Trappist Business Success and His Own Entrepreneurial Experience. That one is worth taking a look at, everybody, because it's unique. It's got some beautiful illustrations on it. And I could go on and on and on. He apparently lives on a farm in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so let's bring him on the screen. He should be blushing now because I built him up so much. Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. Augie, welcome.
Tom, glad to have you baby back, and thanks for calling me Augie. Excuse me, and you took that cheap shot at my haircut, but okay, I'll let that slide.
Well, at least, you know what you should have done is put the robe on, because the monk's got to look like a monk, right? Yeah.
I have one upstairs that I wear when I go.
That's pretty cool. Well, listen, this is all about the hero's journey storytelling, but I want to start off. My brain is going in a direction about what you said about the monk. Not far from where I live, I'm the west coast of British Columbia, Canada. About an hour's drive. My wife's mother passed away many, many years ago. And one day, a few years ago, Anna said, let's go for a drive up to Mission, British Columbia. Well, we went to Mission, and we all of a sudden drive up to this monastery. And her mom used to love to go there. Her mom didn't drive, and Anna would take her every year. And I went in there, and there was this peaceful silence and this incredible feeling, this spiritual thing that just washed over me. And I remember I was inspired thinking back about you, and I thought, geez, I could probably come here and spend some time. But enough about that. Welcome back. Hey, listen, something big happened yesterday. Tell us about that.
Well, I hope you're referring to the fact that my new book, Not Less Than Everything.
Yep, show us that.
I'll now plug it right here. One Man's Quest for Spiritual Enlightenment just dropped yesterday, and we're offering it for the ebook version for 99 cents on Amazon right now. So it's Not Less Than Everything. But it just came out yesterday after a lot of 3.5 years to write it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And everybody, you got to get the book. And one thing I'm going to ask you to do is when an author's book is out, we want to get known. So I want you to get the book, read it, but go to Amazon and or goodreads.com. Augie will show you, but post a review so we can get the buzz going about the book. Let me ask you something. I go back right back, and the thing I notice about this book is it fills in a whole lot more about your life than what I learned at that snapshot in the other book I read. Just take us back where it all started. Tell us a bit about your childhood. I remember lots of people in a house, and just
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
some really
I
cool
grew
things.
I grew up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh,
Yeah,
in a 950 square foot house with 7 siblings, 6 younger brothers in a row, and then a baby sister. My father and mother were both highly educated, but my dad didn't make a lot of money, and so we were all packed into that 950 square foot house. And as I went on to say at one point in the book, we never went out to eat, we never went to the movies, we never went on vacation. We had a party line phone, we had one bathroom, et cetera, et cetera. So um, frankly, it makes it a little hard for me to be sympathetic to people today who are complaining and whining about how hard they have it financially.
I know. And that party line, I remember that. Holy smokes!
Right.
And so from there, I remember that. Whose footsteps did you follow in terms of who shaped you the most, mom or dad, or was it somebody external?
That's a really good question, Tom. I think both of my parents, as a matter of fact, I dedicated my book to my parents. And two, the one thing that I got from both of my parents was a fanatical commitment to education. There was never any question about whether I was going to go to college or not. And so, and from my father was an ultra practical guy. He was a hustler. He had to be a hustler with all those kids, and he didn't make a lot of money, even though he was college educated. And so he was always working, always figuring out a way to hustle a buck or make a friend that could help save him some money.
Yeah,
And I see, and I'm very good at, frankly, I'm very good at business, at the practical stuff. I can set goals. I can get things done. I wrote an article for Forbes about what's the most sought after of all human beings in business: the person who can make things happen. It's an ambiguous word that's hard to pin down, but people, and my dad taught me how to make things happen.
yeah.
I owe to my mother all of my spirituality. My mother was, loved great literature. She loved, she was Latin literate. She loved poetry. Um, so my philosophical side, my dad's philosophy of life was, if it was difficult, don't think about it. Just don't think about it, Og. Just don't think about it. That
Wow.
was
Is
the way
that?
he,
And
yeah.
I'm just reflecting on it. If it's difficult, don't think about it.
And
And
like personal stuff personally, he would think a lot about how to make the
yeah,
next buck, how to make a
yeah,
buck. But
yeah.
if it was something, if he was having a religious problem, he couldn't understand how this goes with that. I don't think about that. I just don't think about
Oh, I see. Okay, my head went back to this scene in the new Top Gun movie Maverick, where they train the fighter pilots. I don't know if have you seen that show yet.
it. No, haven't seen
Uh,
it.
it's first of all, I'm not here to promote the movie, but this was the first time I've ever seen a movie filmed where they put cameras in the jets. They taught the actors to fly them, and it was they had something like 7 or 8 cameras within the cockpit. And there was one scene where they brought Maverick back, Tom Cruise, to teach the pilots. And if anybody remembers the first show, Augie, they kicked him out of because he was just such a train wreck. He has a bit of a backstory like you and me, sort of.
Maverick.
Maverick, yeah. So just finishing on the story there. So what they do is they teach you, and I study brain science a lot about building neural pathways. So literally, if in a split second up when you're in a cockpit, you don't make the right move, it's a matter of life or death. So they train them. They train them on this mission that they were to fly between 2 mountains, and there was literally not enough room for the plane to move from side to side. If it was off even 10 feet, it would basically hit the wings. And and he was on a training thing, and he got out of the cockpit, and looked at this young guy, and he gave him shit. He said, "Man," he says, "what are you doing? What are you doing?" He says, "When you're up there," he says, "you don't think." He said, "Because if you think, you're dead." And that's what popped into my head about reflecting on what your dad said. I think that applies also. So tell me what you think. But if we overanalyze and think too much about things, we never get things done. What do you think about that?
Well. First of all, that's not what I meant with my father.
Yeah.
My father was, avoiding personal. When I had a girlfriend problem, just don't think about it all. Just don't think.
Okay. Avoidance.
Yeah, it was avoidance. My dad's not think about it was an avoidance. What I always say is that it's like Father Christian told me at the monastery once. He said you have to be soaked in theology. He said, but then at some point you let theology go. You know, um, I remember taking golf lessons, and and I remember my golf pro told me, and I wrote an article for Forbes about this, by the way. And he said, I want to give you a simple, spontaneous, effortless, easily repeatable, you know, no stress golf swing. Then he proceeded to work the hell out. I lost 20 pounds taking golf lessons. I had a million things in my mind I had to think about. One minute he would say, he says, "Don't be so tight. Don't. You're so tight. You got to relax. And I would relax. I didn't say quit on it. And I came up with this philosophy that it's until you get to this point. So, in order to get to effortlessness, by the way, that's the title of my book, Not Less Than Everything. T.S. Eliot is the theme that runs through it. You've read it.
That's right.
T.S. Eliot's definition in his 4 quartets for spirituality, and he doesn't actually come out in the poem and say my definition is, but I believe it is, a condition of complete simplicity costing not less than everything. And you and I were talking a little bit about hockey before that we went on today, and all you ever hear when you hear that, I got to keep it simple. We got to keep it simple. And that's what my golf pro said. What is your swing thought? What are you thinking about when you stand? The greatest golfers have nothing in their mind when they swing the golf club. But it takes years of effort to get to that point.
Yeah.
You can't just jump to that. It's like a high school student who's going to jump to blank verse for the first poem he writes. No, you got to learn meter. You got to learn rhyme. You got to learn patterns. You got to learn all this stuff. Then you forget it all.
Yeah.
There's a great scene. You mentioned a movie, so I got to come back at you. But and that one of my favorite movies of all time is a documentary on the making of Apocalypse Now. And in this one scene, Dennis Hopper's tripping on acid. And Francis Ford Coppola says to him, he actually has these glasses, and he says, "You see, Francis, you see these cracks in my glasses? Every one of these cracks represents a life I've saved." and Francis Coppola says, "You don't know your lines, Dennis." And he says, "Francis, you told us to forget our lines." He said, Dennis, you learn them first, then you forget them.
I love that.
So, to get to a point of complete simplicity, it doesn't mean simple-mindedness. It means getting to working so hard that you finally just let go and let God, and you're completely, but it takes an enormous amount of work. An actor spends years with intentionality in order to be able to relax and just to act naturally, to make us think he's just completely natural. Driving a car is the same way. In the beginning, it's complex. Really, you're thinking a million things in your head and you're frantic and blah, blah, blah. Later on, it becomes second nature, so that you can be listening to a book while you're talking on the phone, while the radio's on, and drive and be perfectly comfortable doing it. So I'm always, yes, you're absolutely, that's the goal.
Yeah.
But you can't skip the work to get you to that goal.
Everybody, it's a teaching moment. We're here with Augie or August Turak, the author of Not Less Than Everything. The book dropped yesterday. You want to go get it, and it's on for 99 cents also as a ebook. But I would get the nice version as well. It's got a beautiful cover. Hey, August, hold that up again so we can see the
All right.
Just tell us the title
Happy
again.
to. It's called Not Less Than Everything.
I'm just going to full screen you.
One man's quest for spiritual enlightenment.
Now, I've seen a lot of book covers, as you know. I'm an author, but how did you get that beautiful illustration on the cover? Who did that?
Well, we were discussing the way I got into my writing career was by winning the Templeton Prize. My college students browbeat me into, browbeat me into entering an essay contest back in 2004. And I had to answer a question for the Templeton Foundation. What is the purpose of life in 3,500 words or less? And and I only had like 2 weeks to do it, and I was up against, international and it was professional writers. And so I was not getting anywhere. One of my students said, why don't you write that story about Brother John at the monastery that you're always telling us about? It's an encounter between me and this Trappist monk on Christmas Eve. So I said, wow, that's an idea. So I banged out this essay in a couple of days, got it in just at the deadline. And 6 months later, they called me and said I won $100,000. I won the Templeton Prize for $100,000. Anyway, later I wanted to publish it as a book because
hang on. We got to jump in there. You're so calm about that. $100,000. Listen to that, everyone. I had no idea because $100,000 is a lot of money. Just take us back in that moment. How did you feel when you got the call?
That's funny. That's a great question. You know why? Because I'll never forget it. It turned out I was up against 10,000 essays from 47 countries.
My goodness.
And I'd never written anything before in my life. And when I finished the essay, Brother John, I thought to myself, I really like this, but there's no way. It's too religious. It's too spiritual. It's not going to, and plus it was very dogmatic. I said, there's only one purpose to life. Everybody has the same purpose. And so I forgot about it. And then I get this call like 4 or 5 months later. And it was 3 or 4 people on a conference call telling me that I'd won $100,000. And my first reaction, which is funny you asked that question, is these are my buddies.
That's a joke.
These are my old MTV buddies or something, and they're jerking me around. And so I was screaming no, and they were screaming yes, and I was screaming no, and they were screaming yes. And so that's how I found out that I'd won $100,000.
Yeah. See, now I'm thinking what I'm going to do, just because I love you, is I'm going to get some of my friends together. We're going to call you back and say we're with the committee that decided, and we ran it through AI and found out you plagiarized it, so we want the $100,000 back.
Oh, wait, actually, this funny thing is what they told me is that there was a hitch for a while, which I never knew about, because my college students, through the self-knowledge symposium that you had just mentioned, had actually applied and got a small grant from the Templeton Foundation some years before.
I see.
And so there was a issue about whether there was a conflict of interest, and they kicked it upstairs and kicked it around and decided no, this had nothing to do, one didn't have anything to do with the other. And so they awarded me with the Templeton Prize. And so that's what launched. So anyway, when I over the years, I would get emails. I mean, some of them were very profound, deeply moving emails about how this essay had helped people who were struggling with depression and et cetera. And then one day, it was 6 or 7 or 8 years later, I get a telephone call, a guy asking me if he could come visit me. And he ended up coming and he sat on my back porch and he told me that he was an executive vice president for BB&T Bank at the time. And that's now Bank of America, I believe. Anyway, and his wife walked out on him and he was madly in love with his wife. And he completely hit the skids and was contemplating suicide. And somehow or another, he stumbled on my essay, which was floating around the internet someplace because it was now 7 or 8 years old. And it really helped him and changed, saved him. And he actually took a sabbatical from his work and went to Mepkin Abbey for 6 months. And that really turned him around. He went there as a monastic guest like me. And so when I was on his way out the door, he asked Brother John if he could come and if he could get my address because he wanted to personally thank me. So he drove 5 hours to my house to personally thank me. So I was sitting there with him and I said, I'm very, very moved and by what you're saying. I said, but I also feel guilty. And he said, well, why would you feel guilty? I said, because you're not the first person. And I feel like I have a candle under a bushel basket.
Yeah.
More people need, if this message is so healing, then how can I get it? So as soon as he left, I called Melissa, who runs my nonprofit. And I said, I've been kicking around this idea of what if it's only an essay, so I can't make it into a full-length book. But what if I made it into a book with art? What if I got an artist to illustrate it? And I only talked to one artist, Glenn Harrington, who did the cover to this book, which I keep holding up. He also did the cover to this.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And he got so excited about doing it, but I knew I was only going to have one bite at the apple. I've never met Glenn personally. I don't remember how I got his telephone number. I don't know how we got in touch. And so I called my nephew who worked for Scholastic at the time. And I said, Jamie, I said, I got one bite at the apple. I don't know anything about art. This guy's enthusiastic, but do I have the right artist? And he said, well, let me ask around the art directors here in New York and see what I can find out. Call me back to, he said, my God, that guy's famous. He said, everybody up here uses him for covers and stuff. He said, he's going to do 22 oil paintings for you, original oil paintings for this book. He said, oh my God.
That's incredible.
So that became Brother
It is
John.
Beautiful. It is a beautiful one.
Brother John, a monk, a pilgrim, and the purpose of life. That's that book right there.
Yeah, everyone, I have to just do a shameless plug on it. You signed that and sent it to me, and I have passed it around. It's literally because I'm visual. I get mesmerized looking at it because the paintings in it, everyone, are so beautiful. Yeah, let's show us one. Just let me full screen you for a minute. That's how awesome this book is. Hold on, isn't that something?
Yep, you can see the similarities, but you noticed the similarities between.
Yeah,
he did both of these books.
That's fantastic. I love it. Hey, listen, we're going to talk about the book a little bit, but I want to show you that you got some fans that are popping up. We'll just read this out. Everyone on the screen, if the podcast you can't see this on the screen. Working with August Turak changed my life. Order his book, read it, apply it in your life, be transformed. Then, in the spirit of service and selflessness, pass it on. That's from Melissa Hawks. Thank you, Melissa, for sharing that today. Pretty fantastic. There's one of your 300 friends and
my posse.
Here's an interesting thought. As an author, tell me what you think. But when you write a book, I think it's a bestseller if one person reads it and it inspires them and it shifts something in their life. To me, that's a bestseller. It's not about how many people buy it. It's about, I imagine you're writing it, like you just said, to get the message out to change lives.
Absolutely. Because believe me, I can, and as a businessman, and this is business people are tuning in, the worst business in the world is writing books. Yeah. It is horrendously difficult. If you want to make a buck or get famous, do something else.
I gotta just agree with you on that. And I did a podcast actually with the literary agent for my New York publisher, which I won't mention the name. And I learned the same thing. I'll put it this way: the myth of publishing is that you make a lot of money. The average writer makes maybe a check to take their family out for dinner maybe once a year. It's crazy. And my
first book was published by Columbia Business School Publishing. It's called Business Secrets of Trappist Monks. It retails for $29.99. I get $1 every time one gets sold.
Yeah, and that's one of the you'll see it on the screen there. I just put it up. Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. I read that one. One CEO's Quest for Meaning and Authenticity. I have to say on that as a hope that it's how you monetize the book. So, for example, in my world, wrote a book, same thing. But when I go out and speak, I package it into my speaking tour. I have some workshops I teach. I use it as a teaching tool. And what I like about what you've done is, everybody, if you can buy a book from Augie, from the author direct, it puts more money into their business, which goes into developing. Why don't we do this? Because we're going to do a little segment called, the author reading. So people love to hear the author reading. I want you just to take a couple pages out of that book. You decide what, and we're going to just let you read to us. While you're doing that, we're just going to put the book up on the screen. I know I didn't preset this. Today, everyone, we're live with the author August Turak with his new book. We're producing live in studio here, so this is not the final show. We're going to edit. And August, you can use this little segment as a marketing tool. So something catch your eye there.
Let me see if I can think of something here that.
Yeah. And as he's looking at that, what I want to talk about while he's looking, everyone, is what I loved about the book was the format of storytelling. It's a easy book to read. When you do storytelling, interesting things happen in the brain. There's the protagonist that appears. He's got himself as the protagonist. Then he's bringing in other characters, and there's resonance. There's something in almost every chapter that will resonate with you. Are you ready there?
Yeah. All right.
We're gonna so we're gonna full screen you, and then I'll go 3, 2, 1, and we'll get you going. So let me set this up. We're here with August Turak, and he's reading out of his new book, Not Less Than Everything. August.
Yep. This is from a chapter called Rose's Kitchen. My first spiritual teacher was a wild, wonderful West Virginia hillbilly Zen master named Richard Rose. And I'm still in college at this point in time, and I'm hanging out with him down in Wheeling, West Virginia, on a Saturday afternoon, and things got heavy, which I've already dealt with. But anyway, he starts talking to me. I finally said to him, "What do I need to know? What do I have to do?" Okay, he said blandly, "Here it is. First, I'll give you the facts and then the formula. Ready? There is a God or absolute truth, and he knows what he's doing. There's a little piece of him in you, and your reason for being here is to bring that spark of divinity to the surface and become it. It's like the difference between potential electricity and actual. Aspiration is the potential, and realization the actual. I call the realization enlightenment, but it don't matter, because when God gets you by the hair, you'll know it. It's that drastic. It'll take you to your knees, but that's okay, because you'll be just where you need to be to start saying thanks. From gratitude will come an overwhelming desire to help a world that first and foremost don't want your definition of help. But you'll try anyway, even if they kill you for it. Now here's the formula. It's simple to say, hard to do. You attack the gates of heaven with everything you have. Go after it hammer and tongs, like your hair was on fire. Spiritual work, by definition, is anything that increases your addiction to truth and lessens your addiction to anything else. You got to face all those little truths along the way, no matter where they lead. Attack those heavenly gates with an axe or anything else handy to the job. But here's the catch. Then he smiled. He smiled the only really beatific smile I've ever seen. You will fail. You'll fail because those gates don't swing in. They only swing out. You can't force your way in. You're only invited. You need some help from the other side because ultimately you can't do it alone. But in your defeat, you surrender. And with your surrender, the doors magically swing open. Mystics call it the magnificent defeat. Is that enough, or do you want me to keep going?
Oh, I got the audience all excited there. Wow. You're a great reader. And, you told me offline that it took 3 years or so to write that book.
Mm-hmm.
Why did it take 3 years? And it's well written. Just tell us what went into that.
I think that's the reason why it took so long. What happened was I was actually supposed to speak in Rome at the Pontifical University about my other book, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monk. And my two brothers decided to go with me. It was February of 2020, and we were leaving on February 29th. And I got a telephone call saying that because of COVID, they had canceled.
Oh, wow.
So my brothers were already, they were going to pay me and everything, but my brothers had already paid for their plane tickets. So we went anyway. The good news is that Rome was open for the 10 days we were there. And we had it to ourselves. We went to the Sistine Chapel. We went to the Sistine Chapel with 10 people. Unbelievable. Everything was empty.
Wow.
But when I got back, I was locked down.
Yeah.
So I started, I just stumbled on an email. Everything in my life, earlier I did an interview about happy accidents, which is the theme of my first book, and how you cultivate happy accidents. But I stumbled on an email, and the email was from a man called Alex Schnitzler, and Alex had helped me to put the book proposal together for my first book, Business Secrets. My agent at the time had hired him to help me put a book proposal together. And I stumbled on an email from him, and it was really well written. And I thought, wow, I wonder if Alex is still out there. I really enjoyed working with him. So I got back, and sure enough, the email was still good. And I said, Alex, I got all this stuff I've written and everything. And he said, well, send it all to me. It was like 700 pages.
Wow.
This stuff I've just been writing over the years. And he wrote back to me, and he said, it says great stories here, but neither one of these manuscripts are a book. But I think we can turn them into a book. And so I hired him to be my coach. And by the way, that's a theme that I'd like to bring out.
Sure.
I dedicate my book business, Not Less Than Everything, to my parents, who were my first teachers. And I said they instilled in me the love of knowledge and wisdom
I love it.
that got me to seek out all my other teachers. I've always had a guru. I always get gurus. It drives me crazy that people are always asking me for advice, and I say to them the first thing, "Who's your guru? Who's your teacher?" I don't have one. Get one. So,
Great message.
so I've always been humble enough to realize I need help. So Alex became my writing coach, and we started on this thing. So I would write, and he helped me to structure the ideas, et cetera. And then I would write a chapter, and then he would tear it apart, and then I'd rewrite it, and he'd tear it apart. So that's what took 3 years. Because along with him, I was really, really, I'm a lifelong reader. I mean, I love Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Moby Dick, which I mentioned many times in Not Less Than Everything, is one of my favorite novels. I know good writing when I see it. So I wanted this to be well written, and I think that is what really took the most time, was unbelievable amount of editing and rewriting that went back into it to try to make it as well written as possible.
I just want to jump in. Thought my brain's going in different directions. When I said earlier in the show to the audience, we're going to have some fun today and do something called Plato's Garden, and that I'll come back to what you said about tearing it down and rewriting, because there's a lot to that, and the reason why we do that. I think you get your best thinking out of doing that. I want to just show you that in studio here, I've been madly writing down on my paper a couple of things. Every time you say something, it evokes a thought in me. You said February 29th. So what's interesting is I thought, I know that date. It was actually the date I stood on stage and did my first TED Talk. And I'm not here to plug it, but my TED Talk was how leaders can lift the stigma of mental health. And as I stood there, August, I was second in the lineup. 2-3 weeks before, just trading stories with you here, I almost quit. And I talked to you offline, and some of my followers know, but in 2018, I had a serious brain injury. Fell in a bathtub, cracked a hole in it with my head. I still have double vision and eye convergence issues. I slipped into deep depression and had my first suicidal ideation. One of the things I didn't know is that suicidal ideation doesn't have to be about yourself. It can be seeing harm to others. And in my TED Talk, and this is why I love you so much, because your message about mental health really resonates, I acted out the first scene of my suicidal ideation on stage. And it was me basically driving in my car. I mean, I think I said something like, my car is parked at the side of this long stretch of highway. I'm like a zombie in my navy blue suit and tie, a well-dressed corporate zombie, snow crushing beneath my feet, briefcase hanging off my arm. I see a clearing in the forest. I gently lay down on my back, placed my briefcase on my chest. And then wolves. They start tearing my body apart limb by limb. It's over. Until I wake up, feels like I'm having a heart attack. My heart's pounding so hard. My anxiety, depression are spiraling out of control. And then my wife wakes up and says, "Are you okay, hon?" To which I say, "Yeah, I'm okay." And then I went into the whole thing about how when I cracked my head and I went into depression, I started wanting to end my life. And I started having thoughts, Augie, that I don't believe, and I want to just riff on this on purpose, I don't believe anybody wants to die by suicide. I wanted to stop the voices in my head, the wolves. And that was a true story. I was heading to a big credit union to train their executive team. I was driving in my sedan, and I zoned out, and I literally had this thought of parking it and going into a forest on the side of the highway. It was snowing, and I literally zoned out, and I had that thing. The second suicidal thought was seeing my daughter hanging by a rope in her dorm room back in New Brunswick, the other side of the country, and I hadn't seen her for years because she's in university. And when all this went on, I denied getting help, but it was because of what you wrote and some of the things you taught me that I picked up the Bible and I started praying. I worked at Costco for 2 years, night stalking, and then I finally saw a psychiatrist, and I got all of it unraveled. And what came out of that too was looking down the barrel of a shotgun at my childhood, which, from my conversation with you, was traumatic. Interesting things happen on the show when I bring great people on like yourself, that your work has changed my life. Now I'm living in my dream and I'm doing things to help other people. And when I read your book, the new one, that there's so many times in that I made notes and I learned something new. So I just want to thank you for letting me put the spotlight on my crappy little story there, which is
it's a very moving story.
Yeah. So let's do something else here. I want to show you. I'm putting on screen here and change it up a bit. And I want to share you a little video that I found, and we're going to watch it together. So can you see that on the screen there?
I don't know.
Let me just add it. All right, who's that guy?
Have a little more hair.
Yeah. After my dark story, it's time for a bit of a joke. So yeah, you look great there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play this video. It's about a minute, and then I'm gonna let you talk to us about it. So just stand by here while I get to the play button. So hold on, August. I'm controlling everything in the studio here, so I have to just get to the. While I'm doing this, tell us another nugget from the books, a thought, a lesson that you want to teach us. Just tell us something like that.
Well, one of the things that I really hammer throughout the book is that when people are talking about spirituality, and matter of fact, I just read about it, surrender. Surrender is such a critical, to let go, let God, getting out of your own way. Yet what's so terrifying about a spiritual path is that two things about surrender. First of all, you can't consciously surrender. You can no more consciously surrender than you can kill yourself by holding your breath. There's no way you're going to allow yourself to die by holding your breath.
Yeah.
At some point, the animal's going to take over.
Wow.
And
we got the video going now. Let's watch that, and then we'll come back to your thought.
Okay.
All right. So it's about a minute and a half. So just stand by. Let's start it at the beginning. Here we go.
If you're at the very beginning of this process, looking for a spiritual path, what are the most important things to do at the beginning of the process?
There's an old alchemist phrase, as above, so below. Or another way of putting it is, the microcosm is recapitulated in the macrocosm, which means that the same rules that apply to the way the atom is held together, they're the same things that are holding the stars together. As above, so below. Spiritually speaking, it's exactly the same thing. The same rules that apply to any successful endeavor in life are also applicable to the spiritual life. My first spiritual teacher used to say, if you really want to become a spiritual giant, he said, get a hold of that book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich, and go through the whole book, and every time he talks about money, you write in spiritual, and then do everything the same way, do everything he says. And so what are the things, the most important things you can do? Well, let's use a practical example. If you want to get in shape, and what is the first thing you do? Well, the first thing you do is you're honest with yourself. And this is something you have to be cultivating every inch of the way, because the greatest enemy of all human endeavors, including spirituality, is rationalization, procrastination, self-deception, lack of self-knowledge. So the first thing you got to do is be honest with yourself, which is the equivalent of the person who's going to go to the gym, standing in front of the mirror and taking an assessment.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing there. What a cool video about 3 years ago. I want to ask you a question about that, Augie. I remember Think and Grow Rich. You and I, last time we talked, I'm a big student of that. And there's this one time where Napoleon talked about two envelopes. And I think that's what you were talking about there, the envelope of the negatives. Tell us about that. I mean, what would you advise people, and through your writing in your new book, the enemy of digging out, the enemy of moving ahead, the enemy of just getting things done. Many of us sometimes are lost on this unthinking treadmill, and the enemy of negative thinking or doubt.
Well, no, I can tell you a story from my business career. when I left MTV to come over to what's now the Arts and Entertainment Network.
Yeah.
And my boss there was a guy named Jim Collins, who was the best boss I ever had. Really, really incredible career, smart guy. And they promoted me, which I didn't want to be promoted. They did, but they promoted me anyway into the marketing department from sales. And the company at that point was really, really struggling. And it was, the marketing department was the vice president was on his way out, et cetera. So they really just kind of threw me in there and said, do something, make something happen is what it was, And I went into this office, and it was where all the interoffice mail went to die. My office desk was 18 inches high with interoffice envelopes. I didn't even have a secretary. My phone wasn't even. And it was one of the few, probably the only time in my business career I panicked.
Yeah.
So I went to my mentor, my former boss, the vice president of sales, Jim Collins. And I said, I'm freaking out. He said, come on, let's go to dinner. Let's go to lunch. He took me to the U.S. Steakhouse on 6th Avenue in New York. And we were sitting there, and he said, here's what you do, Augie. He said, you get a legal pad. He said, and you write down on there at legal pad everything you can think of that you need to do. Anything. Just as fast as you can. All the things that are whirling around in your brain. He said, and then go back over them and pick out the 10 most important. And of course, in the case of business, he said, I recommended the top 1 or 2 ought to either be something about money. he said, never work on more than 10 things at one time. Never work on more than 10 things. He said, and I don't care whether you end up with 200 things on that list. You pick out the top 10 that are most important, and you put the other 190 in the drawer. He said, every time something new comes up, you pull out that thing and you either add it. If it's something that's important, and it goes in the top 10, you take out something that's in the top 10, but you never work on anything more than top.
I love it.
For years after that, Tom, I did that discipline. It helped me so much. So, and then once you have that thing, you just start, you don't, like you said earlier about not thinking, don't think about it. Just start knocking them off. I even clean my kitchen that way. Sometimes I go into my kitchen and it's a disaster.
I love it.
I don't even know where to start. I click in the same gear and I say, just start.
Exactly.
Wash this, put this away. Now do this. And sooner than you can think, the kitchen is clean.
There's a saying so I'm a home chef. Actually, shameless plug. I have you have to go support me on it, man, because you mean a lot. The Quiet Warrior Eats is my Instagram feed, and I actually, growing up as a kid, and I kind of escaped in cooking. So riffing on what you're saying about this, the cleaning the kitchen, I started learning how to go in. But what I do, Augie, is after this, for example, I'll walk down to the market this afternoon and buy things with you in mind. So something about the show, I'll buy, like if we were talking about the forest and trees, I might buy a bunch of asparagus that are wrapped up looking like trees. I bring it home, then I basically go in my kitchen, and my wife coined it the Chez Tommaso Michelin star kitchen. Somebody asked me the other day, how do you know it's a Michelin star? And I said, because it is. I believe it is. But I'll create these plates, and then so I've posted all my pictures up there, and each one of them tells a story. And so I'm going to make a commitment to you right now that I'm going to honor this new book and the interview with you today to actually create a plate and send you a picture of that. But I
grow asparagus, so make sure there's asparagus in it.
All right. And so I want to go back to just what I was saying about you were saying about.
Excuse me a second, Tom, though, but I want to add something to what we just about that little video. And this, I'm going back to the book because this is the same section where Rose is talking about it, and just about what this is exactly. He said, I asked him, I said, is he going to guarantee me enlightenment if I do everything he says? And he says, I guarantee nothing concerning enlightenment. What I neglected to tell you is the 1,000,001 other parts of the formula that ain't no formula. Let's lump them all together and call them grace. He said, all we do is what every businessman does. We play the odds. We work like hell to increase probabilities. Even the businessman needs grace to turn probabilities into success. He just calls it luck. And they all tell you the harder they work, the luckier you get. He said, he said, getting started on a spiritual path, it ain't much different from starting a business. You make a commitment, learn everything you can on the subject, surround yourself with like-minded people, burn your bridges behind you, and stop at nothing short of evil to get there. And the reason why I wanted to mention that is the critical one. Surround yourself with the best people. A spiritual path, as above, so below. Surrounding yourself with the best people works in business. It also works on your spiritual path. My biggest disappointment in my whole career of writing and lecturing and browbeating people is I cannot seem to convince people how important community is. And if you want to get to the gym, and you're procrastinating, the best thing you can do is get a guru, a personal trainer who kicks your butt, and get other people that want to go to the gym. So when you don't feel like going to the gym, you go anyway because you can't stand up your friend.
Yeah.
He's waiting for you at the gym.
Exactly. I love it. We were here today, everybody, with August Turak. We're live streaming. This will be released as an international podcast, as a YouTube premiere video in the future. You're seeing us do a lot of different things. I've been randomly writing notes in the studio here. I just want to read some funny phrases where office mail comes to die. I mean, there's the difference. The difference between I've got to say the difference between knowledge and wisdom is time. And everybody, August, you just heard him again giving us some advice out of the new book. And going back to the kitchen story, I was going to tell you that there's this French line, mise en place. Mise en place means everything in its place. And that's kind of how I saw that list you were developing, is putting everything from my head onto a piece of paper. There it is. And then taking those things and putting them in their place in my life. I just love the wisdom you've given us. We're going to do something fun here now, shift gears. We're going to take you into Plato's garden. So are you ready for that?
I'm ready. I don't know what it is, but I was born ready. I'm spring loaded.
Okay. Spring loaded. Sounds like a gun. Okay. All right. Hold on. Whoops. I have to just, all of this will be edited out, of course. So
Tom, all I can say is I wish you lived closer so you and I could hang out. You're a lot of fun. You're a lot of fun to talk to.
Thanks, man. There will be a time where I'll come down and see you now that I'm.
And by the way, I want to put a plug in here that I told you before we started. I love your studio.
Okay. Now I'm going to come down just for that. I'll give you a hug. Hang on a second, everyone. We're going. Here we go. Add to the stage. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, so I created this little thing here. So let me set this up for you, okay? Just hold on a minute. In 3, 2, 1. And now it's time to hang out in Plato's garden with our guest today, August Turak. Now, going to set this up a little bit, everybody. Many people might not know, but that last week was the week I started my doctoral degree at Middlesex University in London. I don't think I even told you that, August. Not bad for a guy who can't see properly and had a brain injury. So I'm humbled. One of the things that we're learning, it's a transdisciplinary degree over a couple of years, is that there's this thing called critical thinking or criticality. Criticality is when we don't focus on just the now and what we're doing, but we focus on the being and the knowing and the other parts of it, asking questions. Apparently, Plato had a garden, and it was actually named, the word academia, or academy comes from academia, which is somebody back from that time. And in this place, it was not far outside of Athens. Plato and Aristotle used to come and basically kind of do some critical thinking. So I'm going to put up on the screen here a definition. So Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece, founder of Platonist school of thought and academia, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. So here we are with August, and he's entering the garden. And so here's a question, and then we're just going to riff on it. August, read that out loud to us, that question in the bold at the top, if you can see that.
Can you share a personal experience where your spiritual beliefs influenced a significant decision or change in your life? And how did critical thinking play a role in that process?
So before you answer that, I'm going to just read the next part. We're reading it out loud because on the podcast, people won't see this. I'm on the screen here. While I'm doing this, you start thinking. This question invites you to reflect on the interplay between your spiritual beliefs, the being aspect, and the practical application of critical thinking, the doing aspect in your life choices. It can lead to a deep and thoughtful discussion about the integration of spirituality and rational thought. So everything's on the table here. Let's talk about that question. What comes to mind?
Well, the first one that pops into my mind was back in the late 80s. In a sense, and I read about this in my Not Less Than Everything book, I'd kind of gotten off the beaten track. I plunged into MTV. I became a hot shot. I got into drug, sex, and rock and roll, and I lost my spiritual way for 5 or 6 or 7 years, whatever. So in the late 80s, I was down here working for a software company, and I decided I got to get back on the wagon somewhat. So I started I gave some lectures. They were called 5 Years with a Zen Master. I still occasionally do give the talk. It's all these crazy stories, a lot of them which are in my new book about working with this crazy West Virginia Zen Master. And 4 students, college students at North Carolina State University, got in touch with me after my lecture and said, "Wow, we'd like to learn more." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Start a club at North Carolina State University. Once you have a club, they'll let you have a room. Once you have a room, I'll come over on Thursday nights and I'll mentor you and whoever else wants to show up for these meetings." So they said, fine. And they started into it. No sooner did they start than I get a telephone call from my old friend, Joe Tossick. It doesn't really matter what his last name is. And Joe says, "Augie, guess what? I got $500 million from Info Technology, and we're going to pull United Press International out of bankruptcy and turn it around." He said, "I'm putting the whole band back together. Gary Newbern and Pat Grotto and all these guys." You rattled off my old buddies, He said, "And we're going to have so much fun." He said, "And I want you to be my number 2 guy." He said, "I'm going to pay you this extreme amount of money. You're going to have all the perks. You're going to have all this stuff, but there's only one hitch. You got to move to Washington, D.C." And I said, "Joe, sounds great. Love to do it. Can't move to Washington, D.C. "Why can't you move to Washington, D.C.? "Because I just told these 4 kids that I would mentor them for free." And he said, "You mean to tell me you're not getting paid and you're going to mentor these kids and you're going to turn down this job?" He said, "Why don't you just, whatever the hell it is that you do, this spiritual crap, why don't you just do it in Washington, D.C.? We have all these universities, George Washington, American University." He said, I said, "Joe," I said, "I got a better idea. Why don't you move UPI down to Raleigh?" He said, "Oh my God." He said, "Molly will never go for that. That's his wife. She was a friend of mine too." I said, "Joe," I said, "Don't worry about it." I said, "We got lots of women down here. In other words, if my students are interchangeable, then why isn't your wife interchangeable?" So Joe laughed, but I turned that job down. And then that was the end of my career. The word got around that I was a spiritual nut. And as a result of that, but why? So getting into the critical thinking, why did I do that? Because as soon as I hung up the phone, I was devastated. I knew what I just did. I knew I'd just taken my career out behind a Wild House and shot it in the head. My corporate career. And, but I did it because my spiritual teachings up until that point, you keep your promises. You do what you say you're going to do. You put your spiritual priorities first. Seek Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and everything else will take care of itself. So that's what I did. And a matter of fact, there's a funny story because not long after that, I got another telephone call from a company in Colorado, and they said this guy John Berenson had recommended me for the job, and I turned it down for the same reason. So I called John Berenson in New York, who's a big shot, and I said, "John," I said, "thank you so much." I said, "But I turned it down. I turned it down for this reason." I said, "I hope I hope I didn't embarrass you." And he said, "Oh, you don't worry about it." He said, "I covered my ass." He said, "I told him you're the best at what you do, but you're some kind of religious nut." So as a result of that, I ended up becoming an entrepreneur. That was one of the reasons I became an entrepreneur. UPI went bankrupt again. Joe went personally bankrupt. Wow. His wife ended up leaving him. I ended up having to lend him some money. I ended up with 2 super successful software companies. I'm the one that ended up, because I because I did the right thing, even when it wasn't convenient, even when it wasn't the safe bet, even when it wasn't the smart play. Spirituality is not about your prayers that you say, or the type of meditation you do, or whether you go to your yoga class once a week. It's whether you live the life. My whole new books, very little about all that practices and stuff. It's about the difficulties and the challenges and the rewards of living the life. And you do that every single day with the integrity that you bring to the table. And again, if you want to be a leader, I was talking earlier about this today. Leadership is not about you getting ahead. Leadership is not about sitting in your office and wondering, how can I get up that next rung? How can I suck up to my boss? How can I get the board of directors to pay more attention to what I'm doing? No, you're supposed to be selflessly, fanatically committed to getting other people promoted.
Yeah,
you're
I love
supposed
that.
to be, and but the byproduct of that is you'll get promoted faster.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Boy, everybody, we're here with the author of his new book, Not Less Than Everything. We're actually in Plato's Garden here, and we've just done some critical thinking. Man, there's so much in that, and we're just going to give you we're laughing at you. We're going to edit that out. That's what happens when you can't see your board very clearly because you can't see properly. Isn't that funny? That was a spiritual thing that was happening. It was saying that we got to laugh more at you.
Nothing wrong with some heavenly hilarity.
That there's so much packed into this segment, everybody. You got to come back and watch this on the show when it's released, or actually this will stay on the feed. You can watch it again anytime. There's so much in that. A couple things that came to my mind. One was when I burned my boat, leaving the corporate sector and never going back. And I thought it was the craziest thing I ever did. And it was hard because I started my own business, and it wasn't a straight line up. I gave up a solid paycheck. But I'm thinking about this now, and back at that point in time when I burned my boat, I denied my faith. And I know spirituality is broader than that, but I denied my faith. I didn't have spirituality in my life. And in reading your book, I referenced a higher source, or a higher source, universal intelligence, or however we want to put that. I now I started reading the Bible because I didn't get taught when I was a kid. I didn't get taught how to walk in life, how to live a good life, how to serve others. Last thing I'll say is, and you're so beautifully when you said it about serving other people, serving other leaders, that when people ask me what's my definition of a leader, and I say the leader's number one job is to create other leaders. And man,
absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Did you ever give us wisdom there? Thank you so much. So we're going to leave the garden now, everybody. It's great learning. We'll be back again, I'm sure, with some more crazy thoughts from, what did I put down here? A spiritual nut. More quotes.
Yep,
all right, we're gonna shift gears again. Hopefully you're still having fun. These are all segments that I'm going to beautifully link together in the final production. One of the things I want to do just for a few minutes is, we've had August read his book. Now we're going to have somebody else read to you. So I've never done this before, and you're probably saying, what the hell is Tom talking about? But
what the hell is Tom talking about?
I got to just record that as a soundbite. Can I use that?
Yeah, you can use that.
What the hell is Tom talking about? That sounds like something you'd put on the little button there. Yeah. All right, so I'm just going to add it to the stage. All right, this will all be cleaned up. All right, now, if you remember back to our last interview, which was, for me, I'm surprised I can remember that far, but don't worry about reading it there. I remember what I do on my show, everyone, is I do the hero's journey. So Dark Night of the Soul, August knows what that is, the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell, in his book, he talks about something where a moment in his life where he fractured his foot. And it was literally the beginning of a dark night of the soul, or a part of that, where he had to go and seek and discover and just everything. Now, when I had my brain injury, I guess that would be my new dark night of the soul. But I remember on the last show that I said to August, I said, there was something you talked about relating to your mother. And I said, that's it. That's a big part of your hero's journey. It's like when you're seeking to understand yourself, dig deep, you just revealed something. I'm going to play this. This is through an app called Speechify, which I use now to actually read books. So let me just start it. We're just going to listen for a couple minutes. So here we go.
By the fall of 1984, my mother became terminally ill with cancer that, at only 61, would soon take her life. I was visiting for a few days, and one morning, after sleeping late, I headed for the kitchen and met my mother coming through the front door. "Mom, it's not even 10 o'clock. Where have you been?" "I've been to see a psychiatrist who is also a priest," she said quietly. "What did you talk about?" I asked, thinking that, considering her prognosis, her thoughts were turning to her immortal soul and its prospects in the afterlife. I needed to talk to someone because I feel so guilty about what I'm putting my family through. In light of my own selfish spiritual aspirations, her selfless answer was the last thing I expected. She just stood there looking like a lost little girl, and I knew all my mom wanted from life, the universe, and God himself was for her firstborn son to take her in my arms, tell her I loved her, tell her I was there for her, and tell her she didn't have to feel that way. But I didn't. The poignant intimacy the moment required terrified me, and after a few awkward seconds I broke the tension with some banal remark and turned away. In her hour of greatest need, I let my mother down, and so, as I sat suffocating in shame from David's savage reproach, I knew if I could redo anything in my entire life, I would undo my thoughtless, deathbed betrayal of the best friend I would ever have. Several days later, I Christian a casual note. Soon I was pouring my hot out.
Yeah, we're just going to stop sharing that there. Come
Yeah.
back.
That's a tough story.
Tell us, wow, it's like going on a roller coaster with you today. Tell us about why you put that in the book and what was behind that realization.
Oh, I don't know what was behind the realization. The context, of course, is that I'm working with I'm really in really, really, really bad shape at this point, psychologically. And I'm working with this therapist in Raleigh, and who was a very strange character. But anyway, one day I told him that the reason why I'd never married was because I was terrified that that a woman would let me down. I said, whatever other flaws I have, I'm an honorable man who would never let my wife down. And he became very quiet and closed his eyes for a minute, and he opened his eyes. And he was very, very extremely mild-mannered man, so this was completely out of character. And he screamed at me. He said, "Let me tell you something as a married man. You will let your wife down. You'll let her down again and again and again and again. And you'll do it mostly because you're thoughtless."
Wow.
And that triggered that memory of letting, yes, I had let a woman down. I let my mother down.
Yeah.
And the reason why it was so poignant, of course, this didn't come up till it comes up later in the book, but I had this wild relationship with this college student girl, Meredith, that I talk about in the book. And there's a whole series of just crazy prophecies and things in the book that I, to this day, can't get away as being coincidences.
Yeah.
And one day I was walking across the campus with her at Duke because she ran the Self-Knowledge Symposium. We were talking business, and somehow I mentioned my mother, who had died in 1984. This was 1996, and I just met her casually, and she said, "That's it. It's all about your mom. Can't you see?" She burst into tears and she started talking about, "It's all about your mom. Everything is. Can't you?" And then she ended up saying, I don't know what I mean. I mean, she said, but then she said, "I don't know what I mean." And cry. She started to cry again. And at the time, I couldn't put my finger on, I thought, wow, where'd this come from? And maybe she's thinking about her own mother. I mean, I'm over this whole thing with my mother, and which was a complete bull crap, which I had to find out later. So, and I ended up telling the reader in the book that she ended up being like my Oracle of Delphi. She would spout out these things that made no sense and too much sense. And what happens later in the book is these series of encounters with my mother, which shows that her prophecy about everything being about my mother was true. Yeah. And So that is, I'm getting very emotional now. That is the thing that
Thank you.
that I
Well,
would change if I could change, was letting her down like that.
God bless you. We'll let you catch your breath there. Everybody, we're having some emotional moments with author August Turak, and that's the power of storytelling. You're such a great storyteller. I'm sorry for the loss of your mom. I mean, we all want our moms. When I read that, it really resonated some things with me, and I just want to say to you that my father passed away in 2018, actually, and I was estranged from him since I was probably 12 when he left home. And as you know from my last story with you, that he was a addicted father, alcoholism and things like that. And I didn't have my faith in front of me. I didn't learn spirituality until later in life, and I blocked my dad out of my life. And Augie, would you believe it that I started reading the Bible? I started learning how to be kind to people, how to live in the they call it the word, where you treat other people and you forgive and all this. That's what this taught me, not my life with my father. And when I read that story, it reminded me that it was October, Thanksgiving, and my dad kept texting me wanting to get together. And he didn't live too far from me, but think about it. For 10 years, he didn't even see my daughter, his granddaughter, because of me. And I said, okay. So I went to a Starbucks and I had coffee with him. And as I was sitting there waiting for the door to open, the barista was making all the coffee, and that smell hits you in the face when you walk in and you hear the milk frothing and all that. I am like melting in an emotional puddle in my gut. And I'm thinking, like, my God, what am I going to say to him? And my dad came in, and he was a small man from what I remembered him. And he was in his 80s, and he had the goatee beard, and he sat down and he looked at me. And before I could say anything, he looked across. He said, "How are you, son?" He said, "I'm sorry." He said, "I'm sorry for everything I did to you. I release you." And man, I still can't cry. I have to dig into that. That's why I was saying to you that when I talk about this with my counselor, sometimes I say, I still can't cry. I'd have to have an onion here if I wanted to fake it. And they said, don't worry about it. Don't fake it, but dig deeper into why you can't cry. Dig deeper into why you didn't hug your mom. Dig deeper into that. Learn from that moment. And one of the things that came to mind when I read that in your book was the word empathy. And empathy is really being able to feel what other people are feeling. There are people who do it well. I do it because I'm naturally wired with emotion. My wife will walk into the room, Augie, and I'll look at her and I'll say, "What's on your mind? Are you okay?" And she'll look at me like, "How'd you know that there was something wrong?" And the last thing I want to share with you, which was a teaching moment tied to that, is I've started studying neuroscience, brain science, part of what I'm doing in my doctoral, and I learned that empathy can't be taught. And all this bullshit they teach in business school, you got to be empathetic. There's unconscious empathy, and it can't be taught. You either have it or you don't. So one of the things that the neuroscientist taught me is, I say, okay, if you're a business person and you don't have unconscious empathy, meaning you can't feel people sinking in the room when you're driving them, what can you do to coach that person? And this is really cool. What you can do is you can actually teach with markers. You can teach markers. So for example, you can teach that business person that when you're talking and you see people slouching in their chairs, you do this. You pause and you say, "I just want to pause. Is everybody feeling okay right now? It feels a little bit like it's heavy in here." If you're walking down the street and you see a homeless person, if you're not unconsciously empathetic, you probably won't even stop. But you can teach someone, when you see that picture, a homeless person, young person, cold, you can stop and say, "Hey, how's your day today?" And the last one is, if you're August and your mom's in the room and this is happening, we can relearn and teach in a moment like that. When somebody's like that, reach out and give them a big hug. And this is what you taught me, because I know I'm stealing thunder bit here, but what I love about what you're teaching us in the book is you share a story there and you realize something tied to that, the context around it. But your whole works is around this self-discovery. It's around looking and digging deeper into the being, who I am. And when I read that, I can tell you, man, that there are hundreds of people who will read that passage and their brain will go to where mine went and go and realize that I couldn't hug my mom either. And when my dog was dying, the last part of my story, I put my dog down, miniature Shih Tzu, Shadow. She used to always be here in my studio, and I missed her. She was with me when I was recovering from my brain thing. And I went to put her down, and they first of all, I didn't know I had to be in the room. And then they give the first needle, and then they say, the guy goes, I'm going to leave the room now. And he says, I want you to come and get me. And I said, why would I do that? He says, well, in case there's any, seizures or anything. I'm going like, what the fuck? Seizures? My dog's already dying. What the hell are you doing trying to get him? So guy leaves. And I remember, Augie, at that point, and I'm not saying this for your ego, flashing through my head, all the things I'd been taught by gurus like you about what do you do in a moment like that. And you know what I did? I leaned down, and she was like this rag on a table. Her body was almost lifeless. And I just said to her, Daddy's here. Daddy's here. I love you. I'm so sorry. I don't think I was a good person to you. I don't think I ever realized how much you love me. I'm here. I'm with you. I just kept talking to my dog. He came and gave the lethal injection. He went out, and all of a sudden I could literally feel the whole life go out. And I was sitting there, and I just kept doing it again. And then afterwards I went, you mother, why couldn't you do that for 10 years, for almost 20 years? Why couldn't you do that with your own dad? Why couldn't you dig into that and reconnect with him? And so all of that led me on a path to now be a better man. Now, even though when somebody's hurt me, I tend not to be able to show that. Now I've relearned what it looks like and what I need to do. Anyway, you brought that out of me, man. I just wanted to say thank you for your story.
Well, you're very welcome. My mind's going a million miles now listening to you. But the couple of things that jumped into my head is, first of all, I'm not aware of the fact that, I'm not going to dispute that empathy is instinctively wired into us. But a lot of I don't get into it a lot in my book, but my book is about mysticism and mystical experience, and but it was really apophatic mysticism. And apophatic is St. John of the Cross and T.S. Eliot. All the quotes that I use from him are this apophatic path, and it's via St. John called it the via negativa. You're unlearning. You're going backwards. You're tearing off the scar tissue rather than accumulating holiness, rather than getting more holy every day. And to me, what maybe you're hardwired for your empathy, but you can shut it down from fear and the fear of intimacy. And the fear of intimacy is the fear of being overwhelmed, the fear of emotions that were so strong that you would go insane or something like that. And, so, if you remember the story about that the girl Marianne, who was so angry at her father, and she went into this tirade for a whole hour about how much she hated her father and how angry she was with him, and finally at the end, she stood up and she said, thank you so much. This has been so great. And now I know what I have to do. I have to go home and call my father and tell him how angry I am. And somehow or another, the Lord came to me, and I just said, love. When she said angry, I said how angry I am with him. I said how much you love him. And I said it right on top of her perfectly.
Wow.
If we'd rehearsed it for an hour, we couldn't have done it better. Well, she said anger, I said love, and she eventually wrote that note to me that I actually put in the book too. And she says, "Thank you so much," because my sincerity had touched her. And she said, "Now I'm going to be able to." He said, "I did." The reason why I was so afraid when I saw the reason I used contempt when her father was collapsing crying all the time over the divorce. She used contempt for him to shield herself because she was afraid. She said that I would have to go there too.
Wow.
So she used anger and contempt to shut down the empathy because she didn't want to go there.
Exactly.
And the last thing I'll say along that, a lot of spirituality, I mentioned it early in the book, is a process of disillusionment. And we have this concept of disillusion as being something bad. If I said, I'm going to have a school and send your kids to my school and I will disillusion them, nobody's going to send them to my school. But the word disillusion only means to lose what is not real, to lose illusion. So why do we have such a negative feeling about disillusionment? And the reason is because deep down inside, we're terrified that if we lost all of our illusions, there'd be nothing.
Wow.
There'd be nothing. So a lot of times when we're shutting down on the compassion, we're shutting. Mr. Rose actually says to me early in the book, right? He says, you don't have, your problem with you is you don't have any. And when I was like 20 years old, you don't have any compassion, and I'm afraid somebody in your family is going to have to die to teach it to you. And that was a prophecy that came to
my
pass with my
goodness.
mother.
I just remembered that from reading the book. Wow.
And so the point is that we don't want to face the fact that everything can, might be, so we block ourselves. We shut down on these feelings, maybe you don't want to end up like your dad. Maybe if you completely opened up to your father, alcohol would start tasting better to you or something.
Yeah.
So we clench up. And by the way, I relate to you. For many years, there were so many wonderful situations where people would give me at a party when I was leaving a company or something, and I knew that I was supposed to tear up here. It was so moving, but I wasn't able to. Yeah. Because you don't want the vulnerability that comes with sharing with.
That's right.
It means opening yourself up and being vulnerable. I was talking to somebody the other day about the secret to being youth ministry, and the secret to being, why was I effective with college students when other people weren't able to do it? I said, because you have to go first. And the same with leadership. You've got to stand up in front of people and say, listen, here's all my flaws. Here's all my, and basically you're auditioning and you're saying, kids, if you do everything that I tell you to do and everything I'm advising, you're going to end up just like me. How do you like that? And when they don't come back next week, they're saying, I don't want to end up like that old son of a brick.
That's a scary thought.
That's a scary, scary thought. So all of these things are very scary. Exactly. So that was the vulnerability and the intimacy of that moment when my mother told me.
I got to jump in just to say one thing. That vulnerability is interesting. I'd love to have you back. We're talking about that topic just for an hour. That sometimes leaders that I've met and worked with, they don't even understand how to define vulnerability. They think it's like, getting Kleenex and tearing up. I remember learning that vulnerability can be as simple as posting a picture of your dog on Facebook. That's a vulnerable moment. Or saying, "Hey, can we stop the interview now? It seems like it's getting a little bit heavy for me, emotion." So saying that, I find that, and I'll finish with this, that I think the coolest leaders and the strongest ones that I have this resonance and empathy connection to are the ones that can be vulnerable. That is why on my show I don't let people on who don't check the ego at the door. If you're not willing to do what August did, which was tear up a bit and get emotional about that moment, dude, in everything we've done today, and that's why I love you and your story, and I wish I'd known your mom, that one part of the story is going to teach thousands of people who see this show. This is a man who was able to show that emotion, and it's fabulous. I want to, as we go to wrap up, we've done so many cool things today. I want to bring something else onto the stage just to show you. Tell us, there's a beautiful picture this picture on your website. Tell us, who are those people?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. It's a wonderful story. About 15 years ago, a woman who lives down the street in a double wide trailer pounded on my door, and she told me that she has 5 kids. And her husband went to work, 40 years old, and didn't come home, had a heart attack and died on the job. Left her with 5 kids. Can she clean my house? And her name is Cheryl. And over the years, she has become part of our family, and we're part of her family. And these are her grandchildren. And she still cleans my house. Basically, she doesn't really need to, but she's such a wonderful woman. And anyway, she also works for Melissa, and she does part-time work for our foundation too. And the girl that I'm looking to my left there in the picture, that's Kenzie, and the girl to the right is Ellie, and they're actually 1 year apart. Ellie's 1 year older than Kenzie. But so what happened was that she started coming when Kenzie was 2. Just turning 2, she started coming over here to clean the house on Thursdays, and she started bringing these kids along. She was babysitting while their mothers were working. And I just ended up flipping for these little girls. I could walk you into my other room. I can't even get into my one room because there's so many toys in there for these kids. and I'm devastated right now, because both of them just started school. So Kenzie on the left has started preschool, and Ellie just started kindergarten, and I had gotten in the habit of going over almost after my workouts in the morning, almost every day to play Candyland or play hide and go seek or bring them McDonald's, and it was an absolute routine. And I would spend a couple hours a day with these girls, and now all of a sudden, I can't. I'm not seeing them, and I miss them terribly. But the good news is, 6:30 this morning, my phone rang, and it was the two of them on the phone to me before they went to school.
That is so cool. I wonder, how old are they now?
Well, Kenzie's 4. The one that I'm looking at is 4, and Ellie is 5. Oh my God, I just adore those girls. So. And I spoil them shamelessly. I always tell Cheryl, because when Cheryl was always telling me about her 5 kids when they were growing up, they're now all. And I said, I was always telling them, you got to be stern with them. You got to get. I said, and I said, so I'm great with other people's kids, but oh my God, I spoil these girls unbelievably.
Tell us about we did this for a reason too. Show the website. So August Turak Foundation. Everybody, if you're not seeing the video, you're on the podcast. We're at augustturak.com. And the homepage, I would just recaption this. It says service and selflessness. It's in your own self-interest to forget your self-interest. And there's a picture of August, I think what would be on his farm with 2 beautiful little, these girls. But tell us about the foundation. Where can people get a hold of your books and your stuff?
Well, first of all, you can get any of my books, Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks, Brother John, and Not Less Than Everything are all available on Amazon and Walmart and Barnes and Noble. But you can also come to our site, and you can buy Brother John, and you can buy Not Less Than Everything from us. Not Less Than Everything, we're actually offering for 50% off. It's a $29.9 value. For the launch, we're offering it for $15. And as I mentioned, you can go to Amazon right now and you can get Not Less Than Everything, the ebook, for 99 cents temporarily. The foundation is in the introduction to my book, I give 3 reasons for writing the book. 1, I wanted to write an entertaining potboiler of a good story, spiritual adventure story. Number 2, I wanted to bring the spiritual back into it. I'm talking about the magical. I'm talking about the miraculous. I'm talking about prophecy and things like that. And 3rd, I said I wanted it to be a small antidote to the sense of meaningless and purposeless that's afflicting Western civilization. I mentioned that just in speaking of little girls, just in February, the CDC came out and said 57% of teenage girls report being constantly sad and hopeless. 30% have seriously considered suicide. Young boys are failing to launch, living in their parents' basements till they're 40. Depression is the number 1 disease afflicting Western civilization. I list this whole list of these things. Yeah. So so I agree with Andrew Sullivan that these are not one-off problems. It's not a problem of social media, for example. I know for a fact that in the 1990s, I was teaching at Duke, and that's when I first met the girls who were suicidal, who were cutting themselves, burning themselves, and all that kind of stuff, long before social media. It's a spiritual crisis, and all these mental health problems are actually just a collage of symptoms of one disease. And so my foundation has 2 wings to it. The major thing is we're dedicated to bringing a sense of higher meaning and purpose to a world that so many people find bereft of higher meaning and purpose, meaninglessness, And the second thing is because of these girls and some other girls like them, I have a thing called the Educating Emily Fund. And so, for example, these 2 girls, we've set up my nonprofit puts money away for them for college every month.
Oh, so awesome.
So I do a lot with disadvantaged kids. I do stuff like that with the nonprofit, but primarily, it's the spiritual message and that's what I'm saying. I started from a college student who was looking around and saying, is this all life is? Is this all there is? And I went looking for that magical, and I eventually found it. And that's the story of my life. And I'm hoping to say, listen, if you feel like life doesn't have meaning, if you're looking for the magic, if you're looking for the miraculous, it's there. It's not going to come easy. It isn't, but if you're willing to, pay the price and go after it, it's there. And that's what I'm hoping to inspire people with the book. And that's what everything I'm doing with the and And my definition of it all is it's a journey from selfishness to selflessness.
I love that phrase, everybody. Teaching moment on the show, a journey from selfishness to selflessness.
Enlightenment or cosmic consciousness or Satori or whatever you want to call it, Unio Mystica, the Christians call it, is the ultimate form of selflessness because it requires ego death.
Yeah. Wow.
It's not just putting your ego in check. It's putting a bullet in the head of your ego.
Hey, boy, I'll tell you. Gosh, I'm running out of room here. You should write a book on all your isms. You know?
That's the next one.
Put a bullet in your ego. That would be a great book title, man. If you don't go trademark that after the show, I'm going to go do it.
Well, that's what this story is about, is how I put a bullet in my ego eventually.
All right. Well, listen, as we're going to wrap up here, I do this. It's not scripted. People can see my paper here. I write madly, thoughts coming out of my head. So these are words that I honor you with, leadership words. Did this once before with you that came to mind. The first one is critical thinker. You are, man, the picture of a critical thinker. It's just the wisdom that comes out. He's incredible. Number two, I'll call you Zen master from now on. That's a term I just love. It flows off my tongue like a smooth gelato.
Trippingly.
Number three, storyteller. You're one of the best, if not the best storyteller I've had on the show. And that connects to people, creates resonance, makes me want to follow you. Number four is wisdom. As I said, the difference between knowledge and wisdom is time. You got it, man. So fantastic. I'm going to make a commitment here and everybody to get the book. I'll hold it up one more time there so we can take a look at it.
All right. I'd be happy to do so. Nothing like a plug.
All right. There it is. No less than
Not
everything.
less than everything. By the way, the quote comes from T.S. Eliot. Is his description, in my opinion, is the best definition of spirituality I've ever read. It's in his poem of Four Quartets. He says it's a condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything.
That's fantastic. And so on that note, everybody get the book, post a review for it so we can get the word out there, pass it on. And August, it's been a treat. We spent almost an hour and a half going to produce an incredible show for you. Actually, I'm going to commit to giving you the raw tape so you can cut it up and use it for different purposes.
We will absolutely do it. We'll absolutely do it.
So thank you for your time and everybody.
And you promised me, don't forget, you promised me a copy of your book.
Absolutely. And on that note, everyone, find that true purpose like you see here with August Turak and find the meaning of your life. Live life with passion and live that life that you deserve and desire. And we'll see you all again here on the live stream. Until then, August, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, just stand by. I just noticed your. I saw this comment come in. I went, "Oh shoot, we didn't put it on the screen." Well, we're still taping, so I've also been called Zen entrepreneur. I love that. I'm going to take us offline now, so just stand by.